Will Yuji be the next Sukuna? Will Yuji end up being the strongest cursed spirit after all is said and done? I want to have an open discussion with you guys, and I have been speculating how the story of Jujutsu Kaisen will end with a few of my previous theory videos released, so if you haven't already, please do go and check those videos out if you are curious. I talked about in one of my previous videos discussing the foreshadowing of Yuji's granddad's words on Yuji dying by being surrounded by people, namely the people he cared for, like his friends. The dark twist that could happen is that Yuji will be dead or is about to die in the hands of Sukuna, but also be surrounded by the dead bodies of his friends. So in a dark, gruesome way, Yuji's granddad's words did end up coming true. Akutami's words back in Jump Festa 2020 is that either one person from the group of Yuji, Nobara, Megami and Gojo will die, or everyone excluding that one person will die. Okay, so my interpretation, and for many other fans as well, either one dies and the rest survive, or they all die and one survives. And if Yuji is surrounded by the dead bodies of all of his friends, then that means that the one that survives is Sukuna. But what if the one that survives isn't Sukuna? What if it does end up being Yuji? What if Yuji is the only one that survives in the end? If it does end up being Yuji, then I don't think Yuji will be able to take it. Cursed spirits are created through the leaked cursed energy from humans, which derive from the humans' negative emotions. The despair from seeing all of his friends die in the hands of his biggest enemy Sukuna, I think will send him over the edge. I have explained many times in my previous videos that Akutami loves to have history repeat itself. So one thing I can see Akutami doing is the famous scene from season 2 episode 17, the "Hey brat, take a good look," which Sukuna used as the ultimate trump card to destroy Yuji mentally by making him see the damage he has caused and all the people in Shibuya that he has killed. Shibuya is left with a massive crater, and Yuji still feels it's his responsibility that he was the one that killed all those people and not Sukuna. In chapter 165, when Yuji has a retrial, when he was fighting off against Higuruma and his deadly sentencing domain expansion, when Judge Man accuses Yuji of mass murder in Shibuya, Yuji replies with, "Yeah, I did that. I'm not lying and I won't deny it." In the very next chapter, after Yuji defeats Higuruma, Higuruma says to Yuji that he is innocent. It was Sukuna who was in control of his body, so there's no way he can be charged of the murder of all those people. But the fact that Yuji still admitted guilty for Sukuna's crimes is proof that Yuji feels responsibility for Sukuna's actions. Him saying yes to Sukuna's massacre in a trial already shows it, and even in the end of episode 17 when Sukuna makes the switch back to Yuji, it's Yuji who is calling himself a murderer. He never once was cursing Sukuna or saying anything against Sukuna. This level of trauma is generational, and Yuji had to deal with this level of guilt all by himself. Now, if you think this moment in Shibuya where Yuji was the witness of seeing Sukuna kill innocent civilians that he has no relation to, can you imagine what his reaction will be if he ends up seeing all of his friends dead? Gojo's already dead, Nobara is already supposedly dead, Kusakabe got sliced up and will most likely die, Higuruma will probably end up dying after Sukuna has his fun. Sukuna is working his way through all the Jujutsu sorcerers, so inevitably, I feel all of them will end up dying by the hands of Sukuna, which will leave only Yuji left. And if Yuji does end up killing Sukuna, then Megumi will also end up dying. So there's literally no one left. All of his friends' dead bodies will be lying there whilst he is there alone, being the one that killed Sukuna, but at the expense and sacrifice of all of his friends, which will reignite and be reminiscent of that moment back in Shibuya. But instead, this moment he sees all of his friends dead. That will be the ultimate nail in the coffin for him. As this moment here will be history repeating itself in the story, Sukuna was the one that massacred the innocent in Shibuya, which left Yuji standing by himself, seeing the horror that Sukuna has caused. And again, in this moment that I'm talking about, we'll have Sukuna again be the one to massacre the remaining Jujutsu sorcerers, whilst Yuji will be the only one alone left standing once again, seeing the ramifications of Sukuna's actions. The despair will be too much for Yuji, as I believe in this very moment, Yuji will end up becoming a cursed spirit, which is once again history repeating itself. Sukuna was also a Jujutsu sorcerer before he became a cursed spirit. Maybe Sukuna back in the Heian period suffered suffered grief and tragedy himself, which is why he became a cursed spirit. We see in chapter 238, when Sukuna is in his Heian form, he's fighting off against Kashimo, and there was a mini flashback scene where we see a monologue within the chapter itself explaining that Sukuna back in the day destroyed the Sun, Moon, and Stars squad and the 5 empty generals serving for the Northern Fujiwara clan, and routed the Abe clan's elite forces, which included Angels and the Deshi Pacification squad composed of the Sugawara clan remnants. You see the image of Sukuna standing alone whilst he is surrounded by his enemies. Sukuna in that image had the 4 arms, so he was full 4-armed cursed spirit Heian era Sukuna here. There was no mention of Sukuna having an army. If anything, it seemed like armies were being stacked and used against him. Which is the point I'm trying to make. Sukuna may well have been evil from the start. We don't know enough details of his past yet, so we can just speculate, but it could be either of 2 things. Either he was an evil prick from the beginning and was just being a jujutsu sorcerer just for the sake of having power, which then eventually led to him becoming a cursed spirit. Being evil can also evoke negative emotions as well, such as anger, which we have seen Sukuna be plenty of times. Or it could have been a scenario that we have seen already in the story, in that he was a good guy who turned into a bad guy, either having a tragic loss in his life or just him absolutely losing his shit. Basically, Sukuna could have been the original Geto. He saw the evil of humanity and possibly the evil of jujutsu sorcerers. It is said that the Heian era was the golden age of jujutsu sorcerers, so are you telling me there wasn't massive wars happening between each of these clans that Sukuna was fighting off against back in the day? Gojo mentioned to Megami in a flashback scene back in the Shibuya incident arc in chapter 117 that the head of the Gojo clan and the head of the Zenin family fought each other to the death and ended up killing each other, which tells me that all of these jujutsu families and clans must have had battles and wars against each other. This is one example right here. So Sukuna back in the Heian period might have had his close friends and family killed in a massive war between the clans, which is the reason why he prefers to be alone, as it gives him the freedom to do whatever he wants and not to be emotionally attached to anyone. Because if this were the case and his close friends and family did end up dying, which resulted in him falling into such despair that he became the 4-armed cursed spirit that we see today. Which is why we see that image in chapter 238 of Sukuna standing alone, surrounded by his enemies, instead of having his friends and family as backup. Now, if this were to happen, and as I mentioned already, the Akutami loves repeating history in his story, a quick example I'll use is again the example I used already. Gojo says to Megami, the head of the Gojo clan, who was a limitless user along with the 6 eyes, was versing off against the head of the Zenin family, who happened to have the 10 Shadows technique mastered. And what happened a few chapters ago? Oh wait, Gojo versus Sukuna. Gojo being a limitless user with the 6 eyes, as well as Sukuna using Megami's body, who is in name now the head of the Zenin family, who also happens to be a 10 Shadows technique user. History is repeating itself, and this is just one example, but if this were to happen, then Yuji becoming a cursed spirit and becoming the next Sukuna, I don't think that's an impossible scenario for this story. If Yuji were to become the next Sukuna, then maybe he will end up becoming the good version. It can be something like Demon Slayer, and please guys, keep it spoiler free. I'm an anime only when it comes to Demon Slayer, so don't spoil anything for me. But you see how in season 3 of Demon Slayer, Nezuko can now be present in the sunlight. What if Yuji can be the one to bridge the gap between the cursed spirits, the jujutsu sorcerers, and the non-sorcerers? Sukuna ruled in tyranny, whilst Yuji can potentially rule in peace. However, if Yuji does end up becoming evil, if there's no one left to stop him, then the sequels and spin-offs for Jujutsu Kaisen will be interesting. Yuji will end up becoming the big villain in the sequels for Jujutsu Kaisen. You just never know. But in all seriousness, what do you guys think? Do you think history will repeat itself and have Yuji becoming a cursed spirit, just like Sukuna, essentially becoming the next Sukuna by the end of the story? Will Yuji be the only one left standing by the end of the series? Please comment below and let me know in the comments. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the Shaman Tribe.